Welcome to the Grant Writing Simplified podcast. This is the place to learn how to make a big impact in your community through grant writing and nonprofit consulting. The world needs you to step forward as a grant writer and use your skills to lead with confidence. I'm Teresa Huff, former special ed teacher turned grant writer and nonprofit strategist. In my 20 years of freelancing, I've helped nonprofits triple their funding and exponentially increase their reach. Now I'm stepping up to mentor freelancers and nonprofit leaders like you who are ready to take your skills to the next level. It's time to get intentional about your vision so you can create lasting change in your community. Learn the skills and strategies you need to become the grant writer the world needs. Let's do this. Hey friends, welcome. This month, we are going way back to some of the very basic elements of grant writing and what you need to know about grants and just some different aspects around that. First, in episode 77, we talked about how I never start with the blank page when I'm working on a grant, and I walked you step by step through my process. In episode 78, we talked about what does a grant look like. If you're new, you may not know. We all started there at one point or another. Then last week in episode 79, I talked about step by step, where do we find grants and how do you go about searching for those? Now today we're going to talk about 7 things grants are not and what you need to know about grant funding. Before we get into that, I wanted to share a resource with you. Nonprofits and grant writers often ask me where to find grants and how to keep up with all the different deadlines. That's when I tell them about Instrumental. Instrumental is an online database that has made my grant searching and tracking go so much faster. They have search features and funder data all right there in the system. That would normally take me hours to dig up on my own. Instrumental brings all of your grant research, tracking, and project management under one roof. In fact, I like it so much that I've partnered with Instrumental to give you a free 2-week trial and $50 off your first month. Go to teresahuff.com/instrumental and use the code GWSPOD. That's instrument with an L. Give it a try and let me know how you like it. There are so many misconceptions out there about grants and how they work and how grant funding is managed. We talk about all of these in the Fast Track to Grant Writer, my VIP program, so that you can approach your grant writing career with a more successful strategy instead of just trying to hit and miss and hope for the best. The end goal is to help you increase your income and your impact through grant writing. But first, we really need to break down some of these common misconceptions. Now, even if you as the grant writer understand these points, you may have a board member now and then who might not get it. And this will give them an outside perspective and help educate them. You can share the podcast episode or even just take notes, and this will give you kind of a step-by-step explanation for each of the misconceptions. All right, let's talk about these. First of all, grants are not a quick fix. Grants are a very long game. Usually, when a grant application is posted, there will be kind of a window when that is open and there will be a submission deadline. And by the way, if you miss the deadline, you're out until the next term. There are no late submissions. Then once you've submitted the grant, it's not unusual for it to be several months before you hear any kind of announcement about awards. Sometimes it may be a little quicker, like a few weeks, but usually it could be months. I've even heard of longer, like up to a year, even past a year, before they announce the awards. Sometimes they might narrow down and have finalists before they announce the awards. And then there might be a second round of, okay, now here are the finalists. So they have to submit a next level type of application or interview process or a presentation. That's not as common, but I tell you that just because sometimes you will come across that, and it is not a fast process at all. Grants are not a quick fix for your building emergency issues, your roof leaking, your heating system went out. Grants are not something that you can just tap into to fix those things that are super urgent and that you need money for right away. You need to tap into other funding sources for those. And you need to plan out your grant strategy as the long game so that you can build a pipeline of successful funding over time and build relationships with those funders. Number 2, grants are not easy money. Grants are a lot of work on several fronts. Grants are work to apply. If you're awarded the grant, they are work to implement. And then once you are implementing and actually using the funds, running the program as you said you would, there is work involved with the reporting. You have to track the data, you have to track the numbers, you have to do the interviews, the surveys, collect all the information, the reports. The budget tracking has to be super precise so that you can accurately report on everything that you have done with the award. So grants are a lot of work, and you have to make sure up front that you have the capacity to actually implement the grant if it is awarded. Number 3, grants are not a bailout. That means if you are just on your last dime, your nonprofit is just about out of money, you're on the verge of bankruptcy. That is not a good reason to apply for grants, and it's not good timing to be reaching out to grant funders. That's an indication of several problems. You probably have other funding issues. You probably need to be working on your capacity and building up your management and your other fundraising before you even think about grants. The thing is, grant funders are looking for stable organizations to invest in. And if you cannot show that stability and that history of good, solid fundraising, diverse income, good fiscal management, then you're not going to be a good investment for them. So they're not going to bail you out of bankruptcy or of money problems. You need to make sure and figure out, have other ways of handling that and build that up on your own before you even start thinking about grants. Number 4, grants are not a starter plan for your nonprofit. A lot of people think, oh, we can just get grants to start our nonprofit and get it off the ground, and grant funding will pay for everything. That is not how grants work, and that's not what grants are for. Grant funders don't want to be your first dollar or your only dollar. So you really need to think about how can you be raising funds and developing other sources of funding. Which brings me to the next point, number 5. Grants are not a solo funding plan. You can't count on grants as your main source of income. You really need to diversify. Now, if that sounds a little bit intimidating, or you're wondering, well, where do I even start with that? Go back and listen to episode 67, where I interviewed Alicia Mathis, and she broke this down step by step of how to start if you have a new nonprofit, or if you just have a small nonprofit that really hasn't taken off yet. She gives 9 key steps of really starting with your core, start with your board, and go out from there and build your strategy, build your fundraising plan first. Then you can move into grants down the road. But those core pieces will help get you ready for grants in the future. You just need to take things in the right order. Number 6, grants are not a free-for-all. Some people think, oh, we can just get grant money and then we can use it to do whatever we want, to pay the bills, to buy new stuff that we need. That is not how grants work. There's a responsibility that goes along with grants to use the money just like you said you would in the guidelines. Funders usually have a certain mission that they want to carry out in the community, and they want to support specific causes. If you are working in that area, then you can submit your grant proposal showing how you will make a difference in that cause and how you will impact your community. And you'll outline in the proposal the steps you'll take to do that and how you'll use the funding. So then when you're awarded the grant, you are responsible to do that as you said you would. It's not just free money, and you need to make sure that you are being responsible stewards of that funding. Keep the grant maker informed as you go throughout the project. Show them that you are reporting and implementing and doing everything as you said you would. And finally, number 7, grants are not a magic cure. People seem to think that, oh, grants are just out there and all we have to do is apply. But yet people don't really seem to be getting them left and right. If they were that easy, wouldn't we all just have grants all the time to pay for everything? That's not how grants work. And so there's this misconception that we need to break down and understand that grants are a part of a bigger strategy. They can be a really good source of funding for a nonprofit, but there's a lot of work that needs to happen before you worry about grants and before you start that application process. This is what I work with my clients on, and the ones that are the most successful are those who really take the time to build this core foundation. It's kind of like building a house. You need to start with the blueprints and the correct materials and that good foundation first. If you were just to start with putting up the walls before you had the foundation or before you had a blueprint, it would be a mess and it wouldn't last. It wouldn't stand. So grants are the same way. You need to start with the core foundation. Even though it may not be the part that you want and you're excited to get to the grant writing part, you really need to back up and do these other steps first. All right, so those are the 7 common misconceptions that you need to understand. Grants are not a quick fix. They're not easy money. They're not a bailout for your money problems. They're not a starter plan for your brand new nonprofit. They're not a solo funding plan. They're not a free-for-all, and they're not a magic cure. Once you figured those out and you can start operating from the place of what grants are, you'll be a lot more successful. If this is resonating with you and you are feeling compelled to help nonprofits in a more impactful way, you can learn exactly how to become a successful freelance grant writer in my VIP program, Fast Track to Grant Writer. We work together in this personalized program to develop a plan based on your goals and your top skills. I'll help you find the shortest distance from point A to point B so that you can launch your grant writing career. I'd like to invite you to start today at teresahuff.com/BIP. Again, another quick shout out to today's sponsor, Instrumental, for their support of grant writers and our work of making a difference in the world. Today, we have talked about 7 things that grants are not. I'm curious, did any of these surprise you? Connect with me on LinkedIn and let's continue the conversation. If this was useful, please pass it on, share it with a friend or a board member or someone in your nonprofit so that together we can create a ripple effect. All right, friends, have a great week and go change your world.